Okay, today I'm going to give you a full comprehensive setup guide for using perhaps the best Commodore 64 emulator out there, which is of course WinVice. So in today's setup guides, we're going to look at loading cassette images, loading disk images and cartridge images, explanations of different program file types. I'm going to show you how to set up RAM expansion units, which is also known as REU. Also look at super CPU settings, how to swap disks during gameplay, and I'm also going to put this video into chapters because there's around 30 minutes of this video today, and for those who knows bits and pieces of it, it might just help you a little bit more just to skip straight to a chapter. But anyways, this is the fully comprehensive guide for the Commodore 64 emulator WinVice. Check this out. Okay then, before I start today's Windows PC Commodore 64 WinVice setup guide, make sure to hit notifications, subscribe and like so you don't miss upcoming retro emulation content. It helps my channel a great deal, plus it gets you retro emulation content as I release it. So we're looking at Commodore 64, specifically the WinVice emulator today. So reasons for doing this is that I'm obviously a Commodore fan, as a lot of you out there know. And last time I did a WinVice setup was actually going back to March 2023. And in December, we actually had an update for WinVice Emulator. So I thought it's about time I released a new setup. And that one's actually looking old to the previous one I did. And also to say, the funky wallpaper you can see right now is actually lively wallpaper. And I really like this. It just saves you from looking at a really boring screen. There's actually something for you to see now as I'm talking. So we're going to go over and download WinVice Emulator itself. As we can see here, this was released on the 24th of December 2023, and this is going to be version 3.8. So let's actually download WinVice. And if you're unfamiliar with WinVice, in my opinion, WinVice is pretty much the best Commodore 64 emulator out there. I've covered other C64 emulators, and a lot are actually based around WinVice. So yeah, it's pretty superior compared to some out there. So we're going to go to the Windows section. I'm using Windows 11, and we got several different downloads just here. The one I'm not going to suggest downloading is the SDL2 version. We want the GTK3 version, and we got two versions of this in itself. We got 64-bit and a 32-bit. So this is asking us what type of computer we've got, your processor or CPU. So to find this out, if you're not sure, open up the search bar, type in system information, and under system type you'll find just here a number, and this is going to represent your computer. So mine's a 64-bit CPU, and so it says times 64. If you've got a 32-bit computer, which is unlikely at this day and age, then it will pretty much say times 86 base PC. So I'm going to download the 64-bit GTK3. And that's going to take us over to SourceForge. That's okay, it's a trusted website. And here we go. So we just downloaded GTK3 WinVice 3.8 for Windows 64-bit. If I just left click on this extracted folder, and what I'm going to do now is just drag this folder out onto my desktop. So just extract it to wherever you want. Personally, for easy access, I just suggest putting it on your desktop. Okay then, so we now extracted WinVice, and here it is. Now before I open this and go any further, let me just tell you that Commodore WinVice, or just WinVice Emulator, actually emulates all the Commodore 8-bit computers. So it's not just C64, but it'll emulate the Commodore Plus4, the Commodore PET, Commodore VIC, like I say, all the 8-bit micros. So if we open up this folder, there's a lot of subfolders inside here. One we need to look for the actual emulator is in the bin folder. And if we just drag this down, you're going to find VSID, X64 SDTV, times 128. So obviously times 128 is going to be for the Commodore 128 computer. Now for the Commodore 64 side, we got the DTV just here. The one I'm actually going to use is 64SC. Now what we can do with this is actually make a shortcut. So instead of going through the folder every time, if we right click on it, we can then go to show more options, send to, and desktop create shortcut. And whilst I'm here, I'm also going to tell you that this also emulates the Super CPU for Commodore 64, which is obviously a needed expansion. So we've now got the shortcut on our desktop, and I'm going to just leave that folder just there for now because we will need it at some point. Now, to test this out, I've got 3 different file extension games. So WinVice Emulator supports .CRTs, which are cartridge images of Commodore 64 games. I've also got another game here which is in .D64 file extension, which is an image of a floppy disk. And I've also got a .tap, so this is a cassette image. Vice will also run things like .prgs and .d81 files, but these 3 just here are pretty much the most common you'll get for Commodore 64. So to open a game, we can pretty much just drag and drop onto the shortcut. That's a real easy way around it. If I just drag my Sam's Journey onto the shortcut, and as you can see, that pretty much boots straight into Sam's Journey. So there's other things we need to do, such as set up controllers. We can emulate the sounds of the 1541 disk drive. We can change keyboard regions. So for example, if you're in America, we can actually change it into an American keyboard. Commodore 64 keyboards are very different to modern time keyboards. So there is that setting to look at as well. So if we open up Vice, okay, so this is what you're going to see when you first open up Vice. So obviously this is the Commodore 64 boot up screen. So things we need to look at then, first of all, is I suggest plugging in the controller. I'm using a Google Stadia controller for this. Now, if we go to joysticks at the bottom just here, just left click on one of those black D-pads. And if we go to configure joysticks, just left click on this one. Now, Commodore 64 games are run from port 2. I'd probably say 99%, 98% are from joystick port 2. So imagine you've got a real C64. Port 2 is always going to control player 1, pretty much. So under joystick, port 2, or joystick, I'm going to select my controller just here, which appears as 6-axis. Left click on this one. Now, whilst we're in game, if you do need to swap ports, then we can actually use the option here, just check swap joysticks, and that's going to change it to joystick 1 whilst we're in the game. And you also need to make sure that save settings on exit is also checked. So first up, what I'm going to show you is how to run a cassette game, and obviously this is called a .tap image. So I've got a .tap on my desktop, so to load this, so if I go up to File, and just go down to attach dataset image or dataset image. From here, I can then search for my game. So if I go to desktop, my game is just here. This is Fuzzball, and this is only a preview. Sadly, Fuzzball never made it into a full release for the C64. The Amiga had it, but the C64 didn't. If you're interested in reading about this story, check out Games That Weren't 64, and you'll find out all about Fuzzball just there. But anyways, if I left click on this, we're going to find the image contents here as well, which can be handy, especially if we're loading up the 64 or disk images. But for this, what I'm going to do is just go to attach loads, and we can also auto start this as well. But just for this, I'm going to attach loads, and I'm going to type in loads, and then I'm going to press enter. Press play on tape. So I'm going to go to File, Dataset Controls, and I'm going to press on Start. Now this is going to start loading up the cassette image. We can actually speed this up. Right at the bottom left, we got a warp button. If I left click on this, it will go green, and this is going to speed up. As we can see, if I press that, CPU percentage is increasing, as well as FPS. So I'll do that again. And if we also left click on this area, we can actually pause our games from this area as well. So pause emulation, it pauses and unpause. And from here we can actually select warp modes. We could also go to maximum speed and put this up to 200%, or we can go to custom CPU speed, left click on it, and we can actually enter a custom speed. So for example, say 500,000 or 5,000. Now, obviously, when the game is loaded up, you're going to have to very quickly just push on warp and just make sure that maximum speed is put to 100% again. So let's play a bit of fuzzball. If I unpause it, and we've got no sounds right now, so this is a good opportunity to show you where to do this. If we go to preferences and we go down to settings, audio, sound driver, enable sound playback. And I'm going to just pause that again. I'm going to remind you that if we double left click on the screen, we can actually go into full screen this way. So if I unpause it, so monumentally failed it. That game, to be fair, wasn't too good at this game anyway. And there's only 2 stages on the preview of this, as it was on the Commodore format, Power Pack cassette back in the day. So what we can do from here, to close the game, we can go to File, and from File, we can go down to Reset, in Reset Machine. And there you go, so it reboots. Now, going back to Sam's Journey and .CRTs, which are cartridge images, you can drag and drop them onto the Vice shortcut, or you can go to File, Attach Cartridge Image, and Desktop, and then just search for your game. Mine is just here. And in this case, we can actually look at chip packets and all types of data which is actually connected with this game itself. So if I go to attach this, I'm just going to say just there that most of the time when a Commodore game asks for you to hit the run stop key, obviously a modern day keyboard doesn't have a run stop. I think that was the bottom left, second up from the bottom left on the C64 keyboard, where the run stop is. Obviously a modern day keyboard has got the left shift. So in order to do this, just press escape, and that normally acts as your run stop button. And I'm also going to go to preferences while I'm talking about keyboards. And if you go down to settings, input devices, just drop this down, keyboard. From here, we can actually use host keyboards layout to select our region. So I'm going to just stick with American US, but other regions are there. So say you're in France or Germany or Italy or whatever, just select that layout. So next thing I'm going to show you is how to load a floppy disk image. So these are in .d64s, although .d81 files are also floppy disk images, but they're not so common as D64s. So what we're going to do then is go up to File, Attach Disk Image, and you'll notice that there's drive number 8, drive number 9, 10, 11. Now each one of these represents a disk drive. So back in the day on the real Commodore 64, normally you would type in a command which was number 8, and that would represent the first disk drive, and so on, or something to that effect. So what I'm going to do is attach disk drive number 8, and I'm going to choose my salamander.d64, and it's also going to list the image contents just here, what's actually attached inside of that .d64. So I can either go to auto start or attach load. If I go to auto start, it's going to automatically load the game. So screens like this is your traditional trained cracked version. So just go through this with your keys on your keyboard. And just like cartridge image, we also need to eject disk images as well. So to do this, we go to File, and from File we'll go down to Detach Disk Image, and it's in drive 8. So if we just detach and then go to File, and then from there we can then reset it by going to Reset Machine CPU. And there we go. Now just like the CRT, D64s, if you just go to Reset, the emulator still thinks the disk image is still in there, so it's going to boot it back up again. Okay, and whilst I'm talking about loading disk images, from time to time you'll come across Commodore games which has a couple of disk sides or maybe a few disks. So to do this, we're going to use the game Bad Blood as its example. If I go up to File, Attach Disk Image, Drive 8, and then I'm going to select my Bad Blood Disc 1. Now, if I just stretch this out a touch, we'll actually see that there's two discs here. So we got side A and we got side B. So if I load up side A from here and then go to auto start, and what I'm going to do at this point is just warp the game so I get to the point where it's going to ask for the next side. So please flip this to side 2. So what we're going to do is actually use disk side B. So File, Attach Disk Image, and we're going to go to Drive 8 again. And I'm going to select Disk 1 side B and attach and load. And generally that's how you do it. So obviously some games such as the Newcomer game by Protovision has God knows how many sides and God knows how many discs. If you're not aware of the game Newcomer, it's available at Protovision, and yes, it's got around 10 to 15 floppy disks with that game. And I'm also going to mention we can actually change video settings from here, or brightness and saturation, that type of thing. If we go to the bottom where it says CRT, if I left click on that, you'll get CRT settings come up. So obviously this is going to be emulating a Commodore monitor, so we can mess around with brightness settings. We've got saturation to play around with, which is going to take it to black and white or really high in contrast. We also got gamma. So personally, I think the default settings for Vice doesn't represent a Commodore 64 screen too well, but I could be wrong. We also got scanline shade. If we put this right to the bottom, you'll get that full scanline effect come up. But obviously, if you're using this, then you're going to need to alter your brightness settings just to make it a little bit more brighter. We also got odd line offset just here. And by using odd line offset, that's going to almost give us like that very blurry effects from a CRT screen. Almost like a magnetic look to it, as CRTs used to be. We also got contrast on the other side, so if I just mess around with this, darker to just unreadable. We got tint, which is going to take it to green, up to purple. And we can also blur. So say you're not a great fan of pixelation, then by using the blur just here, it's going to take away pixelation. Let's say, for example, you've made a pink screen rather than the blue, and it's just a complete mess and you just want it to go back to how it looked originally. There's a little arrow just here. It's barely noticeable, but if you left click on it, you've then got your original look back. Okay, so next thing I'm going to show you is how to enable REU, that's RAM Expansion Unit. And there's particular games that you need extra RAM for. So let's just load up a game and I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. So if we go to File, Attach Disk Image, Drive A. Now I'm using Sonic the Hedgehog. This one came out a few years ago and it's a superb port, but it needs extra RAM. So if I go to Auto Start this, this is what you're likely going to see. No REU, no RAM Expansion Unit. Sonic needs at least 256 kilobyte. Okay, that's fine. So what we're going to do then is go to File and we're going to just reset the machine. This time we're going to go to Preferences, Settings, and we're going to just drop down to Cartridges, and here you're going to find RAM Expansion Module. What we need to do is enable RAM Expansion Module emulation, so just check that. And the game also asked for 2 kilobyte, so I'm going to just leave this to 512 kilobyte and that's going to work fine. And we're going to go back to load Sonic again, so File, Attach Disk Image, Drive 8, and here's my game, Auto Start. And here we go, so we just bypassed that REU request because we've done it now. Insert side 2, press fire, so attach disk image, drive 8, and I'm going to select disk 2, attach and load, and press fire. Okay, whilst we're looking at different settings and configurations for different games, there's Super CPU, and Super CPU was a module that would plug into the expansion port on the C64, like Gold Dust. If you can afford one and you can actually find one, then good luck to you. But we can actually emulate Super CPU using Vice. So if you remember earlier on in this video, if we went into my bin folder, we're going to just drop down. And when I was talking about different emulators for different 8-bit micros, we've actually specifically got one here for Super CPU, and this is CPU 64. If I double left click, okay, so the first thing you're going to notice is that we've got Jiffy DOS just here, and it also says Super CPU 64 ROM, so everything's good to go. So what we need to do before doing anything else is just go to Preferences, Settings, and from here I'm going to drop Cartridges down, RAM expansion module, and just do make sure enable RAM expansion module emulation is checked, and also make sure that RAM expansion module size is on at least 8 MB if you're planning on running Metal Dust. So we're going to close that down, and of course you've got all your same shading options and video settings. If we just drop down to CRT, just the same as Vice, which we've been using throughout this video. So we're going to just load this game up as standard, like you would on the normal Vice. So attach disk image, drive A, and just find the game. So I've got Metal Dust Disk 1, and just make a note, this is actually in .d81. And we're going to go to Auto Start. Okay, and if you're planning on playing a Metal Dust game, you will find the device selection. So all you need to do here is literally just press F on your keyboard, and that selects CMD FD2000 disk distribution, and protocol selection has now got standard kernel IO selected. So just press Enter on your keyboard. And like I mentioned earlier on in the video, we can actually emulate the sounds of the floppy disk drive, which is of course the 1541. So to do this, we need to go into the emulator. So I'm going back to Time64 SC. And from here, we're going to go to Preferences, Settings, Peripheral Devices. Just drop this down, Drive. Now just make sure drive sound emulation is checked. And the next thing to check is True Drive Emulation. Now once these two are checked, we can then go up to drive sound volume, and we can increase the loudness of this. So let's just pop this on to 100%. So, and there you go. So we now have got the sound of the floppy disk drive. And again, to load the game up, File, Attach disk image to drive A. And I'm going to load up my Bad Blood disk. So disk 1, side A, auto start. And that's all there is to emulating the sounds of a floppy disk drive. Some of you might like that for nostalgia. Some of you might. Personally, I love the sound of that mechanism. And finally, I'm going to show you how to change different models, different regions of Commodore 64 using Vice. So to do this, we just go to Preferences, Settings, and you're going to find Machine. If you just drop this down, first option is Model. So right now we got Unknown checked. If I go to C64 PAL, is then going to switch over to a Commodore 64 PAL model. And as you can see, as we're changing these, you'll notice that VIC2 kernel revisions are also changing, and there's lots here to play around with. For people out there who's really into the SID chip music, then we can also swap between SID chips too, as well as power frequencies. We can even take a look at C64 SX just here. So of course Commodore 64 SX was pretty much the first say portable computer ever released. I actually owned one once. My son was all over it. Very expensive equipment to buy nowadays. We can even go as far as emulating the C64 game system, C64 GS. If I just go to click, there we have it. We now have the Commodore C64 game system. If you want to emulate Commodore C64 game system, that's entirely up to you. But many, including myself, find this a very pointless system. If we go back to Preferences again, Settings, we can even use PET64 PAL. So obviously just close everything once you're selecting. There we go, awesome stuff. So that's it for today's Vice Emulator setup guide. So appreciated. There's a lot of information within this video, but hopefully I've covered all the different aspects from getting your cassette images loaded to your floppy disk drives. I pretty much covered everything I can think of, being a Commodore 64 fan and a big user of Vice. But anyways, if you liked today's video, hit notifications, subscribe and like so you don't miss upcoming retro emulation content. Also check me out on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and TikTok. And like I said at the start, if you like Commodore, you have definitely found the right channel. We're Commodore friends here. So anyways, until next time, stay retro.